Today, we're doing some reaction content. Alex Morgan, also known as Schmorgle, has a video on his attempt to learn Reaper in a day. I want to comment on some of the things that he found and give some tips for new Reaper users based on what's in that video. And hopefully that's an interesting video for you today. Hope you enjoy. So here's the video. Ableton producer tries Reaper and dies. Great title, great thumbnail. Let's get this started.
Huh? Sorry, I didn't know I was programming a spaceship. What the hell is this?
Very relatable.
I'm pretty determined to systematically get through every single DAW so I can at least have some exposure to anything I can get my grubby little hands on. Without question, the one that people have wanted me to check out the most is Reaper. Unintentionally, very spooky. I have
very spooky
experience with Reaper, like whatsoever.
Yeah, it's interesting to see people that haven't really seen Reaper before at all. I've known about it since like 2006 or so. I tried it many times and it didn't really stick with me until like 2009, 2010, especially is when I like really dug in and learned it.
All right, so we are in front of a blank Reaper session. Don't know diddly squat about this program. It looks very open and welcoming. And by welcoming, I mean I have no idea what to do. We need to just take this slow like we usually do. Slow and dumb. Let's go ahead and try and insert some tracks. Bam! Easy. Look at that. We're making music. This is music. How do I know if is it a MIDI track? Is it a audio track? Does it matter? Can it be both?
A track in Reaper is any sort of track. It can be mono, stereo, audio, MIDI, video, images. I think that's all. VCA, fader, you know, anything can be on any track, and it doesn't have to be just stuck with one track. You can record MIDI, convert to audio on the same track. If you're coming from another DAW, it can be very confusing. Other DAWs have a different track type for each thing you want to do.
It's fairly like old school, I want to say. Like it's very like utilitarian is the correct word. Vocab word of the day. There's a lot of options in here, actually. This seems like it is perhaps fairly customizable. I shall not be doing that today. How do I record?
Yeah, so actually that's a good point. Your first time using it, maybe you don't go in and start customizing everything. You should get an idea of where things are because you're going to be able to follow along with tutorials a lot easier. It's not necessary to customize things, but it's also not necessary to keep it as it is forever if something really doesn't work for you. I have the Fresh Start series of tutorials all about setting up Reaper for the first time as a power user, not as a first-time user. But I think you can learn a lot of things from that series anyways.
Recording my voice, this is a song. Hey, hey, this is a song. Cool.
The first time you install it on a Mac, there's probably more hurdles you need to jump through than that. So the first thing is like, you'll need to give Reaper microphone permission. So, you know, you might have had to add your audio interface, create a track, record on it, and then found out that you can't record anything. This is not his first DAW that he's used. He's probably run into that a few times. And this is something that I see kind of on a weekly basis. Someone picks up Reaper, plugs in their audio interface. They can't use it because of the Mac security options.
Can I change the output device? All right, that's my first demerit here is that in a lot of other DAWs, you can choose one input device versus an output device unless... Oh, well, never mind. Screw me, because there's literally a button right down here.
Right. So he's kind of ignoring all the text here. If you're using one input and one output from different devices, you're best off going into Audio MIDI setup and creating an aggregate device. It's very simple. I'm doing it now so that audio from Reaper goes out to my speakers and also out through the HDMI output to my other computer. So yeah, you can do that. You can have a USB mic plus your computer speakers as your output, anything you want to do. That's the safer way to do it than to use this window inside of Reaper.
All right, demerit revoked. Gold star in place. So if I wanted to add sort of like a MIDI instrument beneath that, how exactly would I do that? Oh, okay, so I clicked on the FX tab and I can add plugins. Okay, so I can put on like this guy, right? Okay, there it is. So any track can be an audio or a MIDI track. Good to know. Oh boy, hello. Oh, wow.
Most users will never find this. It's funny that he found this within the first like 10 minutes. But yeah, you can turn off the UI for any plugin and just see the parameter values. This is more for like troubleshooting, or like if you have a plugin where the UI is not working, but all the parameters and the sound works, sometimes you can get by with using this. If you're designing custom control surfaces using CSI, you need those parameter names and things like that. So most users don't need this, but yeah, it's funny that he found that, and he loaded in a soft synth that has probably 200 parameters. So it's going to be super overwhelming, but
again, very utilitarian. The keyboard though, why doesn't it work? What am I missing?
Let's start there. Let's take this track, just a normal track. You don't get an input until you record arm it. And then whether it's going to be an audio track or a MIDI track is determined by what input you choose. So I can go to inputs, and I forgot to turn on my keyboard. But my MIDI keyboard would be there under this input MIDI. If you're going to insert a virtual instrument, you're better off not doing that manual step. You're going to right click, insert virtual instrument on new track. Select your instrument, let's say Taluno. There's your instrument, it's record armed, monitor enabled so you can hear it. There's your volume control, and it's got a MIDI input automatically assigned, and it's ready to use.
Oh, what? I keep getting distracted. There's so many things to look at. Alex, just try and stay focused for a second. So why don't
I love the editing.
To read it. It just keeps, yeah, okay. Oh, there it is. A track's a track. And that's a Schmorgle guarantee. A track's a track. Took only what? 10 minutes to figure out how tracks work. So what if we put the audio down here on this? I am recording my voice. This is a song. Hey, this is a song. Pretty good song so far. And we got it's very spacey now, you know? Reminds me of like Mac DeMarco. These are all my instruments. I don't believe it comes with... Let's do a little Google check, shall we?
Okay, so I'll stop here because he determined that it doesn't really come with any instruments. That's mostly true. So we've got Resamplematic 5000 and Resynth Drum and Resynth. So 3 instruments. Resynth Drum doesn't have any UI at all. And it has like 4 sounds, and they're not good. The sampler is actually pretty decent. It's not going to compete with Contact. It's not going to compete with an MPC, but there's a lot of things you can do with it. You can load in samples from your project or drag them in through the Media Explorer for Finder Explorer. You can manipulate them. You can stretch them across the keys. You can load in multiple samples using this list function, sort them by peak level or RMS level. You can set them to round robin, where they play in a sequence, or change the probability to something like 50%, and it'll just play randomly. I've done a few videos on Resamplematic 5000 using it as a more advanced sampler. But yeah, I think if he tried this, he would probably like it. Again, pretty utilitarian, he'd say, but it would have been cool if he found this instrument. And then Resynth is just kind of an oscillator module. Not a lot you can do with it. It defaults to a sine wave. You can mix in different wave shapes, but this can't do a whole lot until you're more of an advanced user, adding in effects, adding in parameter modulation, or automating all of these parameters for more interesting sounds. You have to think of this as kind of a single module on a modular synth. It's part of something that can create sounds, but it's not a full sound as it is.
Any good producer should have a few VSTs at the ready, and you can get free ones, of course, but I think if this is going to be your first software, it'd be nice if it had some stuff built in. It's nice that it has effects built in, so maybe we'll just try and use only their effects.
Yeah, I think that's a fair criticism. The instruments that it comes with are not great, especially compared to all the free options out there. There are all those free options out there, so why does Reaper need to make all these instruments, which would have no use for a lot of users? A lot of people use Reaper for very different things: sound design, music production, podcasting, podcasters don't need virtual instruments, right? Sound designers probably have their own collection of virtual instruments or hardware synths that they use for sound design. Music producers, they have both. Some days they'll use virtual instruments, some days they won't. And they probably have their favorites already. But if this is day one of music production and you only have Reaper, it would be nice to have more instruments.
Jesus, I do not love that metronome. I'm going to be honest with you. Good thing I could right click on it and change it. All right, pattern A, B, B, B. That's fine, but how do I make it not suck? Oh, you could change its frequency.
It's funny he would say, how do you make it not suck? Because I actually have a video about making the metronome not suck. And I've shared different samples and things that you can add in. He discovers that you can add in your own metronome sounds and change the volume. The metronome is far deeper than most metronomes in DAWs. Unfortunately, it comes with one of the worst sounds possible as your starting point sound, but at least it is customizable, flexible, and yeah, it's far deeper than what's even in this image.
See, fascinating. I want to just go back a folder, please. Why? Again, this feels like I'm in the innards of a computer program here. Let's find some kicks.
Okay, so he's just missing these buttons here. He's not seeing these buttons. The up button will go up a folder, or back will go back in history. He just missed it.
I like this Media Explorer. This is one of the most hey, this is a gosh darn Media Explorer that I've ever seen. It's not like in its own UI on the side and it's like easy snap bin. It's just it's like a freaking finder on your computer. Hi. Sure, dude. Let's do it. We're in Reaper. Let's make a Reaper-y song. How do I copy you? Like that, like every other DAW. Oh, whoa, I didn't mean to do that. So I tried to copy it, and instead it it cycles through the sample. That's really cool. I like that a lot. That might be a thing in other programs. I've never really discovered it until just this moment.
Yeah, so that's called Move Item Contents. You can customize that in mouse modifiers under Media Item Left Drag. Yeah, Move Item Contents if you're holding down the Option key or Alt key. If you wanted to change that to Copy Item, just double click, copy, choose whichever variation of this. These are all things that you can assign to Media Item Left Drag. It's super easy to change moving item contents, disabling that function completely, or just changing it to a different key. Not all DAWs allow for that slip editing moving contents function. I know in Pro Tools it was like using the nudge tool. You couldn't just drag it to visually align things.
How do I get a fade? That's it. I just literally asked the question and it happened. Cool thing about Reaper, you just have to say you want something and it happens apparently. All right, so what if I want to copy this whole section? Can I just go D and duplicate? I can. That ain't bad. That was intuitive. Can I make subdivisions here? How do I show subdivisions? Insert, no. Ruler layout. There's so many things to...
This is a fair point. Your grid lines is something that should be more obvious. It's in the main toolbar. Either of these buttons, if you right click on them, they will get you to this window here, the snap to grid settings, grid line spacing, but a lot of users just end up making a toolbar for all the different grid settings that they frequently use. Or they use keyboard shortcuts. I rarely see anyone go into these settings. It definitely should be more obvious for new users.
Oh, that's horrible. I can see this being pretty cool. If you're just sample to sample, you want to, make little nuanced differences and changes, like little ploopies everywhere. That could be really useful.
You can definitely do that. You can use this media item properties to change a single item, but this also applies to having multiple items selected. So you can change their volumes, you can change their pitch and their rate, you can replace the files, you can replace their names, all these sorts of things on multiple files at once. It's a really useful tool.
So in this, it's like you choose the literal tempo sync by the number here. The utility of these Reaper plugins is so computer, number savvy.
It's interesting. He's only found the JS plugins. He hasn't found any of the built-in stock plugins, which are pretty decent, and they have their own UIs. There's so many JS effects. It's not surprising that he's finding those first, but I think he's missing out on the best plugins through this video.
There's no like UI mod of like be like, hey, go in thirds, go in fifths, go in, or like, you know, do it in 16ths or 24ths or whatever. Getting overwhelmed.
It looks like he wasn't figuring out how to change the grid size, so he just ended up turning off the grid entirely. I think makes sense for a new user to figure it out that way. But yeah, definitely not ideal. He found the button, he just didn't right-click on it. In Reaper, right-click everything, there's a million options for everything.
I'm doing the vocal take, here's a take two, gonna see if it works, I'm gonna try it. Okay, it looks like it is very similar process.
Yeah, so it's good that he's just recording anything and figuring it out as he goes. It's good to see that he's getting a lot of the basics right. It's really good that he's exploring this in this way, just recording anything and seeing how Reaper responds to that. What happens when you overlap items? What happens when you record on top of another item? How do you mix and match different takes and things like that?
I'm finding out now that UI is very important to me. Where's my compressor? All right, so let's hop into this automation. Whoa! What the
This is the envelopes window, and most users don't need to use this at all. When you're using third-party plugins, this is often very overwhelming the first time you open it up. As you can see here, there's like 1,000 parameters, plus there's a scroll bar. You can go even further. A lot of plugins just have like infinite parameters, and that's overwhelming because like an EQ with 100 bands is going to have like 4 or 5 parameters per band. Tick this little box here that will hide everything, but really don't use this window at all. You should use the envelope button, which right now shows trim as the trim mode, to get to the various basic track envelopes or change the mode. Show last touch effects parameter is what I see most users using, and you'll find that from the plugin itself. Yeah, I think he's used to Ableton, and they show the parameters on the track in a different way. If you're automating a plugin, it's best to either select the parameters from the plugin or go into a write mode and just touch all the parameters that you want to use and just record your automation. If you have to use this window, you're going to have a bad time.
Okay, so we've seen what it's like to manipulate audio. We've seen what it's like to do automation, clearly. We've seen what it's like to mess around in these MIDI channels here in the piano rack. You can copy and paste. You can cycle through the sample like that. I mean, it's not perfect, but it works. You know what? The truth is that I'm not perfect.
All right, so we're going to jump into his final thoughts and then my own final thoughts.
So as you can tell with my less than enthusiastic piece of music, I had some trouble getting into a flow with this program. Don't get me wrong, I totally see all the functionality here, and certain things felt very good to do, such as just moving around my arrangement window. Also, fine-tuning exact pitches and tiny modulation, that can be a really satisfying process. That being said, there's just too much going on here. It was honestly a little overwhelming to just hop in and be creative off the bat. There is so much control happening here. Like too much control, one could argue. Just opening a simple menu reveals the complex underbelly of what is essentially a supercomputer. The UI design is super bare bones, but it kind of has to be with how much flexibility it's allowing you. All in all, it can just be a little bit unwelcoming. I think if you really know what you're doing inside of a DAW, this program can be a dreamlike opportunity. If you are seeking ultimate flexibility, Reaper is a no-brainer. But if we're talking
Yeah, so I totally agree with that. If you want ultimate flexibility, get Reaper. If you're coming from another DAW, which was very limiting, Reaper is very freeing, but it does take time to get set up.
about just pure spontaneous creativity, I personally found myself bumping up against one momentum killer after the other. Oh, I just want to tweak this one little thing. Oh, nope, there is a menu with 1,000 different parameters. Oops, I'm scared now. I imagine with enough time and patience, this could easily be argued as one of the most powerful DAWs in the industry. But its sort of sterile and open-wide presentation leaves a very distractible Schmorgle sort of slack-jawed and unsure where to go. And despite all this flexibility and opportunity, this DAW actually comes with very limited FX options. And one real bummer is that there's no built-in VST instruments to speak of. That might not be a problem for someone who's been collecting a bunch of soft synths over the years, but for anyone who just wants to jump into a DAW and start making music, you're not gonna have a lot of instruments to play with. In fact, none. So if that's the case, who is this DAW made for? Well, when I did some research and saw that it was built on Python, that actually clicked with me really quickly. This DAW is really made.
Yeah, I don't think Reaper is built on Python. I'm 99% sure it's not. Python is supported for one of the scripting languages, but is probably the one you want to use least compared to Lua. Minor correction there.
For a programmer, or at least someone with a programming type of mind. Literally every aspect can be tweaked to the decimal. So if you are that audiophile who knows exactly what you want out of your manipulation, this is the program for you. It offers everything and more. But for a distractible doof like me, barely got 8 bars of music out. All right, so those of you who didn't want to watch this whole thing, too long, didn't watch, here's the basics. Pros, it's a well-built DAW, really capable, exceptionally flexible and open source, which makes it incredible.
Okay, not open source, open development, but the source code is not public. Often feels open source, and there's a lot of open source elements of it with the scripting community, add-ons to Reaper, but Reaper itself is closed source. Very common misconception.
Incredibly customizable. Every plugin I threw into it ran like a dream, and my CPU stayed at a nice healthy level the whole time. And of course, it's very affordable. At its discounted price, it's 60 bucks. Pretty unbeatable. And some of the cons, as far as I'm concerned, it takes time to really fall into a groove with this program. There are almost too many options when opening menus. It's a tad clunky and awkward if you're used to more streamlined programs. And it just comes with very few plugins and add-ons. But enough of what I think about Reaper.
I agree with all his criticism of Reaper as well. He missed a few things, but good video, entertaining, and he didn't get anything too wrong. And hopefully my commentary on top of this has taught a few things for beginners coming from other DAWs, or, maybe these are basics that you had missed even if you've been using Reaper for a while. So if you liked his video, be sure to check out the original, give it a like, and I don't want to take any views away from his video, so this is going to be highly edited, cut a lot of content out so that you'll see the whole thing on his channel. If you have comments for him or tips for him, I'm sure he'd be interested in hearing that, and if he ever wants to leave Ableton, Reaper community would love to have him. I think he's a great musician. He has an entertaining YouTube channel, great personality, and yeah, so if he ever comes back to Reaper, let's give him a warm welcome. So that's it for this video. Hope you've enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Support the Reaper blog through Patreon. Visit reaperblog.net for a lot more tutorials.